Karen had always walked through life with a sense of entitlement, believing that the world was a stage and the rules were there to be bent to her will. She looked at the royal guards, standing motionless in their red uniforms, and saw them as little more than a well-rehearsed tourist attraction, a quaint piece of history on display for her amusement. She approached Buckingham Palace with the same air of superiority that had served her so well in the past, certain that the spectacle before her was just another performance, another backdrop for her carefully curated life. As the changing of the guard ceremony began to unfold, she stepped into the path of the guards, smirking, expecting them to politely go around her. As if they were part of the show, performers in a play designed to accommodate her, but what she didn't realize, standing there in her designer outfit, was that she was about to face a force far greater than any expectation or privilege she had ever known. The guards, unflinching and disciplined, marched forward without hesitation, their every step in perfect synchronization. Karen, rooted in her position, felt a sudden, disconcerting realization that this was not a performance. These were not actors, nor were they there for her entertainment. They were soldiers, bound by tradition, history, and an unwavering sense of duty. The world Karen had built, one where convenience and comfort were paramount, was about to collide with a world of discipline, authority, and time-honored respect. As the guards approached, Karen's defiance grew, convinced that they would veer off to avoid her, as if the rules of tradition could bend to her convenience. But as Guard Windsor, a man of precise training and unwavering focus, drew closer, she realized how wrong she had been. There was no deviation, no softening of their march. With military precision, Guard Windsor executed a controlled shoulder barge that gently but firmly removed her from their path. It wasn't an act of cruelty, it was the force of discipline meeting the immovable resistance of her entitlement. The world around her seemed to pause as her sunglasses flew one way, her phone another, and the ground met her with a humbling force. The moment that followed was not just one of physical discomfort, it was a jarring awakening to the reality that some things are bigger than personal desires. As Karen lay on the cobblestones, clutching her injured hand, she found herself in the center of an experience she had never anticipated, a reminder that tradition, honor, and duty are not negotiable. They do not bend to the whims of individuals, no matter how powerful or entitled they might feel. The very things she had dismissed as quaint and outdated had been serving as the backbone of centuries of service, sacrifice, and integrity. As the ceremony continued, and the guards moved on with flawless precision, Karen's mind raced. The lesson she had just learned was far deeper than any photograph she could have taken. It was a lesson about respect, about the unyielding nature of duty, and the humbling power of tradition. In the end, she stood there, not as a tourist admiring a quaint show, but as a humbled individual, learning that some forces are simply too great to be disregarded. It was a lesson in humility, one that would stay with her far longer than any social media post or designer outfit ever could. The Royal Guard was not there for her amusement, they were there to remind everyone who crossed their path that tradition, discipline, and respect are the true forces that shape the world, and that some things, like duty, are timeless. Deborah, dressed in luxury athleisure, arrived at Buckingham Palace with a sense of superiority radiating from her every step. Her perfectly styled blonde hair and the expensive designer accessories that adorned her, bright sunglasses, a flawlessly manicured manicure, and a handbag that cost more than most people's monthly rent, made it clear she saw herself as part of a different class. She strode past the orderly line of tourists, who had been patiently waiting their turn to witness the changing of the guard, pushing her way forward with an entitled air. Her gaze swept over the others in the queue, her eyes narrowing as if she were inspecting a group of lesser beings. She had places to be, people to impress, and the trivialities of waiting in line for a historical ceremony were beneath her. As she shoulder-checked an elderly couple who had been waiting patiently, Deborah barely acknowledged their startled protests. Her voice, sharp and demanding, cut through the crowd as she barked, "Excuse me," pushing past them with ease, as though they were mere obstacles in her way. Her impatience was palpable, each step echoing her belief that her time was more valuable than that of the others around her. "Some of us have places to be," she added, making it clear that her schedule was far more important than the ceremony that the average tourist had come to admire. She was a woman who lived by the mantra that the world bent to her will. Her stride was unbroken as she glided past the others, her designer heels clicking against the cobblestones in a rhythm that seemed to punctuate her disdain for the rules that governed the ordinary crowd. When a palace attendant, with politeness and professional composure, gently asked her to join the line at the back, Deborah dismissed him with a flick of her wrist. "Do you know who I am?" she scoffed, her voice carrying the arrogance of someone who had never been told no. She was above the line, above the rules, and clearly, above the ordinary experience of a tourist. After all, her lunch reservation at the Ritz in less than an hour left no room for such mundane inconveniences. As the attendant tried to explain the security requirements, she laughed loudly, the sound sharp enough to draw curious glances from nearby tourists. "Security reasons? For those toy soldiers?" she sneered, gesturing dismissively toward the guards at the gates, her words dripping with contempt for what she considered nothing more than a charming display for tourists. "This whole thing is a trap," she muttered to herself as she took a few more steps, ignoring the attendant's polite suggestions that she wait her turn like everyone else. She was not like them, she thought. She was a woman of importance, deserving of special treatment, and no petty ceremony was going to stand in her way. Deborah's sense of entitlement only deepened as the palace attendant's polite instructions fell on deaf ears. She barely spared him a glance as he spoke, his words lost in the whirlwind of her own thoughts. The attendant, with his well-practiced calm, politely suggested that she step back and join the line with the other tourists, but Deborah simply waved her hand dismissively, as if his words were irrelevant to her. She had no intention of following such common procedures. Time, she decided, was her most precious commodity, and there was no way she would waste a single minute standing in a queue with ordinary people. Her eyes briefly flicked toward the orderly line of visitors waiting for their turn. But they were nothing more than a blur to her, irrelevant and beneath her stature. "I don't have time to wait," she declared, her voice cutting through the air with the unmistakable tone of someone used to having the world bend to her desires. Her words were a challenge, as though the very notion of being asked to wait was an insult. "I've got a lunch reservation at the Ritz in less than an hour. Do you know how important that is?" she continued, her voice rising slightly, daring anyone to question her. The attendant, a man of poise and patience, tried once more to explain that it was for security reasons, that the guards had their routes and protocols. But Deborah's laughter, sharp and mocking, interrupted him. "Security? Please, those soldiers aren't real soldiers, they're just playing dress-up. This is all for show." "A waste of my time," she scoffed, brushing him off with a flick of her wrist, as though the concerns of the palace or the public had no bearing on her life. She wasn't like the others, she thought. She was someone of influence, someone who shouldn't be burdened by the trivialities of the rules that govern the masses. Her designer sunglasses glinted in the afternoon sun as she scanned the scene. Still resolutely standing in the middle of the path. "I'm not standing in line like some common tourist," she stated with finality, her posture rigid with the belief that she deserved special treatment. After all, why should someone like her wait? The world, to her, was made to cater to her whims, and today, it would have to bend, just as it always had. The changing of the guard, she believed, was just another spectacle, another moment for her to consume as she saw fit, not a revered tradition that demanded respect. Deborah, utterly unmoved by the polite attempts of the palace attendant, carried on with her self-absorbed quest to capture the perfect photograph. She remained firmly planted in the path. Her phone raised high as she snapped a series of images, completely oblivious to the growing frustration around her. The elderly couple who had been quietly waiting for their turn to take pictures exchanged uncomfortable glances, unsure whether to speak up or simply let the matter pass. But as Deborah continued to occupy the spot, blocking their view of the palace and the ceremony, the couple's patience began to wear thin. Finally, the elderly man, his voice tentative but firm, spoke up, his eyes fixed on Deborah's back as he tried to get her attention. "Excuse me, miss, but we've been waiting here for quite a while. Could you please step aside so we can take our pictures?" he asked, his tone as respectful as it was weary, shaped by years of understanding that sometimes, one must choose their battles carefully. Deborah didn't even turn around. Instead, she waved a hand dismissively over her shoulder without so much as a glance. "I'm not done yet," she snapped, her words sharp, as if her photo was more important than the couple's request, more significant than the reason they had come to this place. Her body language was condescending. And her posture, frozen with arrogance, showed no sign of yielding. The couple stood there, growing more uncomfortable, as the space around them filled with tension. The elderly woman, her voice softer but laced with the same frustration, added, "We've been standing here for a long time. We just need a moment." She spoke with the gentle politeness of someone accustomed to respecting others, but her patience was beginning to fray, the growing crowd beginning to notice the commotion. Deborah, however, seemed deaf to their concerns. Instead of acknowledging their discomfort, she positioned herself even more firmly in the middle of the path, oblivious to the fact that others had been waiting their turn, waiting patiently. Just as she had once been taught to do. Her phone, now tilted in an angle she deemed perfect, was her only focus. She snapped more photos, completely ignoring the elderly couple and the young family that had now gathered behind them, their children's excitement growing as they pointed at the royal guards in the distance. It was at this point that the young family, clearly growing weary of the standoff, attempted to edge around Deborah, hoping to claim a small space where they could see the ceremony for themselves. But Deborah, still absorbed in her own world, blocked them too, stepping even further into their path, not once acknowledging the polite requests of those around her. "Honestly, people today have no respect for proper etiquette," she muttered under her breath, as if the world revolved around her, as if she were the one owed patience and deference. As the elderly couple and the young family stood there, exchanging looks of confusion and discomfort, it was clear to all that Deborah had lost touch with the very essence of this ceremonial experience. She no longer saw it as a moment of shared tradition, of respect for history and those who serve. Instead, it had become nothing more than a backdrop for her personal satisfaction, a frame for her own self-importance. The elderly couple, now quietly observing the tension unfold, weren't the only ones noticing Deborah's continued disregard for the rules. A retired serviceman, his blazer adorned with campaign medals that spoke of real service, had been standing at the edge of the crowd, his eyes narrowing as Deborah continued to block the path with impunity. His weathered face, a map of years spent in service, tightened with growing concern as he saw the guard unit approaching in the distance. Approaching her with a calm but firm voice, the veteran addressed Deborah directly. "Excuse me, miss, but the guards are about to come through here. They won't stop for you, you'll need to move." His words were spoken with the weight of experience, a lifetime of discipline embedded in each syllable, but Deborah, still immersed in her pursuit of the perfect shot, barely acknowledged him. She simply continued to fiddle with her phone, framing the guards in the viewfinder as if they were nothing more than part of her personal photo shoot. When she did finally respond, it was with a condescending laugh, dismissing him entirely. "Oh, please," she said, her voice dripping with mockery. "You expect me to move for those soldiers in their little hats?" She turned her head slightly, gesturing to the guards with a dismissive flick of her wrist. "They're just playing dress-up. This whole thing is just a tourist attraction for people like you," she said with a smirk, completely ignoring the veteran's years of service and the sacred nature of the guards' duties. To her, they were nothing more than costumed performers, nothing deserving of the respect they had earned through years of training in service. The veteran stood still, his jaw clenched, but he didn't raise his voice. He was used to dealing with arrogance, though it never became any easier to tolerate. These aren't actors, miss. They're active duty soldiers, performing their sworn duties. This route is assigned to them, and they won't change it for anyone, no matter who you think you are. His voice, though calm, carried an edge of warning. He had been around enough to know when respect for military protocol was in short supply, and this was one of those moments. Deborah didn't seem moved in the slightest. Her eyes briefly glanced at him, but her expression remained unmoved, as if she were the one doing the explaining. "I suppose you used to play dress-up too, right?" she said, her tone laced with sarcasm. She adjusted her sunglasses with a flourish, completely unaware of the gravity of what the veteran was trying to convey. "I'm not standing here to indulge in some quaint little ceremony. I've got places to be," she added, flipping her hair back dismissively, as if the veteran's words were nothing more than background noise in the concert of her own life. The veteran's face tightened further, his patience worn thin. He had tried to warn her, but it was clear that Deborah wasn't interested in being educated about the honor and duty the guards stood for. Instead, she remained locked in her bubble of entitlement, blind to the seriousness of the situation. The guards, still marching forward with the unyielding precision they were trained for, were only moments away from reaching her, and the veteran knew that the lesson Deborah was about to receive would be one that would stay with her far longer than any photo ever could. As the first faint notes of the ceremonial music drifted across the palace grounds, signaling the beginning of the changing of the guard, Deborah remained firmly planted in her position, utterly unaware of the weight of the moment. The guards, with their flawless precision and synchronized movements, began to march forward, their boots clicking sharply against the cobblestones. The crowd, sensing the impending spectacle, began to shift and adjust, making space for the guards to pass. But Deborah, her eyes still focused through the lens of her phone, remained rooted in place, her defiance growing with every passing second. The veteran's warning echoed in her mind, but she dismissed it as easily as she had dismissed everyone else. After all, why should she move? The guards were part of the show, weren't they? A performance. No different from the costumed actors at a theme park. She raised her phone higher, framing her shot with increasing confidence, completely oblivious to the growing tension around her. The guards, in their scarlet uniforms and towering bearskin hats, were now clearly in sight, their disciplined march drawing nearer with every step. Yet, to Deborah, they were just a distraction, another piece of the scenery for her perfect photograph. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to hit like and share it. Subscribe to our channel for more inspiring videos. Thanks again and see you in the next one.